Do we all know what we're doing?
Let's do it.
You're listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Bree.
And I'm Rachel.
And this time for our episode, we have another one-question interview, which means we have somebody in studio with us. And it's always fun to have another Lutheran lady in the Lutheran Ladies Lounge to share in our joy, outtakes, shenanigans, whatever happens in here. So, Erin, I'm going to throw it to you and take it away. What are we talking about today, and with whom?
Well, today I have invited my friend Ellie. It's actually, her full title is Deaconess Ellie Corrow.
It's not my friend Ellie, because that would be a pretty cool title.
That's
I need a business
secondary
card.
title. She was a deaconess first.
Oh, that's fair.
Then she was my friend.
Vocation.
Actually, maybe not. No, you were commissioned first.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I was
Yes.
like, whoa, that would have been crazy. Okay,
Timeline.
sorry.
Sorry, I sidetracked you.
So Ellie and I work together in the Office of International Mission, and that's how I met her and got to know her. But I wanted her to join me today because I wanted to talk about something that I think we don't really talk much about, and that is the topic of singleness.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it much.
Ellie, what should we be talking about with singleness that we just completely, there's just a big silence, especially in the church on the topic. Fill it in
Now, just
for
to
us.
Just to confirm before you get started,
Yeah.
Erin, you and Ellie are both single.
Yeah, that's partly
So, like,
why
you
I
have some
wanted
street cred
Ellie.
on
Yeah.
this issue.
Exactly.
probably
right.
I wanted
You didn't ask me.
another. Exactly. I mean, we did not, do this as just a two-person episode. I think it's a conversation that should be had in the broader church.
Because all of us were
But-
single at one point,
Yeah.
and some of us still are, and some of us still aren't. So
So, ask a really easy, straightforward question.
just lobbing it out there. folks.
Just lobbing it out there.
Yeah.
So let's fill the silence here.
Well, yeah, I think that, there's a lot of movement to kind of laud and extol marriage, which of course is great and wonderful and everything else, but often forget that Paul talks about singleness in really kind of glowing terms and says, I wish you all could be single like I am. It'd be great. And we tend to forget that. And, marriage kind of gets elevated. And singleness becomes this thing that you need to fix in your life. And it's like single is synonymous with not yet married. The assumption that everybody's on their way to marriage. And that's
Or
the
should
goal.
be.
Or should be. And if
Yeah.
they're not on their way to marriage, something's either really wrong with them, or they think that marriage is a terrible institution and they hate married people, or all of the above. And so I think what we failed to do is just support singleness as a valid vocation and a joyful vocation. Doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah.
Do you think that this might be something that Lutheranism is kind of like uniquely sort of in a posture of doing this because of Luther and Katie getting married all those years ago and sort of really fighting against this notion that single people were holier than the rest of the world because monks and nuns were all single. And so maybe we've swung it too far the other way. How do you see the history and our theology sort of like playing into this question?
I don't think that we're unique in this. I think the accents are a little different. I think we're probably unique in, the Book of Concord actually addresses Paul in, 1 Corinthians 7 when he's talking about the gift of singleness. I don't know that there are a whole lot of other denominations that have pages and pages and pages about why marriage is a good
Anything like
thing.
we do, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, valid point. But I don't know that other denominations have spent so long actually wrestling with, hey, marriage is a good thing and we should value it, and this false idea of celibacy needs to be rejected, is this, vow that has inherent holiness attached to it. That said, I don't think we're unique in the way that marriage has been extolled as kind of the norm. In that, evangelicals struggle with this. If you if you start searching, Googling, the church and singleness, you're going to get all kinds of blogs from people across denominational spectrums that are talking about a lot of the same things and a lot of the same struggles, approaching it from different theological angles, but it's not a unique thing to Lutheranism.
Speaking about this in our culture, and the fact that Bree and me and Rachel, we were at one time single and are now not, but I know I grew up during the heyday of purity culture and purity rings, and I am saving myself for marriage. And in that conversation...
We kissed dating goodbye.
We kissed dating goodbye. I fell in love with Jesus.
Right, exactly. But in that scenario, in that mindset, there is no talk of singleness. It is... I am single now because I will be married later, and that's where it ends.
Yeah.
And what has that done to us?
Right.
Well, I think we see some of this in that, when we talk about the gift of singleness, often people will kind of develop these two tracks where it's, if you have any desire to be married at all, then you don't have the gift of singleness, and so you're destined for marriage. And there are these, people will sort of say, hypothetically, there are these people that Jesus makes who just don't want to be married and don't ever want to be married. And those are the people that have the gift of singleness. Now, nobody's ever actually seen them in the wild, but supposedly they exist because Paul tells us they exist. And I think that purity culture has exacerbated a lot of that, because it's like, unless you're like completely asexual, then you need to be getting married. And so there isn't a whole lot of helpful talk about chastity and self-control and things like that, which is super odd because, those are things that we all have to practice, and we all have to practice self-control throughout our lives. You don't just say, well, this is a thing that I want to do, so I'm going to that's what I'm destined to do, and that's what Jesus wants from me. No, there's barriers on all of those things. Even even within marriage, obviously, marriage isn't a free-for-all.
Right. Yeah. Just because you're married, you can't do whatever you want.
Exactly. I'm not...
Which is not something that we're taught either.
No. Yeah.
You still deal with the Sixth Commandment sexual issues even within the confines of marriage.
Exactly. Thank you for phrasing it that way. I was trying to find a good way to phrase it that wouldn't have a homeschooler alert.
And I know that, right, yeah. And I know that, when I got married, that didn't even cross my mind until I got married. And then I was like, wait a second. It's just different. I don't struggle with the same things, but there are definitely still struggles.
Right. Yeah. And when you're with a partner, or when you're with your spouse, I'm not going to say it's harder or that the implications are more significant, but like when it comes to the Sixth Commandment, you have a separate human being in that relationship that when it comes to matters of chastity and self-control, you could hurt that person as much as yourself.
Yeah.
Well, and to your question, too, back to the purity culture thing, something that just occurred to me is a lot of that talk was about saving yourself for your future husband. That's what it was attached to. It wasn't chastity for its own sake.
Right.
It was chastity for the benefit of a hypothetical neighbor who you don't even know exists. As opposed to for the benefit of yourself and for your actual neighbors.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That's an angle of that I had not considered.
Yeah.
You talked about how viewing this as the gift of singleness, and that's language that, again, don't usually hear.
Nope.
It is usually, we definitely talk about the gift of marriage, the gift of children, gift of all these things that most of the time we want, but don't usually talk about the gift of singleness. Why would you choose that language in particular?
Well, it's Paul's word, so I'm a big fan of sticking to...
No need to recreate that wheel.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of sticking to things, the language that Scripture uses. But I think in our kind of English way of thinking about it, we're thinking of Christmas Day and, it's awesome, good things that I've always wanted, and this is great. And so we measure whether or not something is gift based upon how we feel about it. And so instead of it being the gift being measured by the giver, our good and gracious Lord who desires good things for us, we're measuring it on the basis of this, but this is something I don't want right now. And so instead of seeing it as an opportunity to love and serve our neighbors through this avenue, it's kind of this anger at God or feeling like you've fallen short somehow because you haven't achieved this thing of marriage. Instead of embracing it and saying, okay, this is a thing the Lord has given to me, it doesn't have to mean I have to love every single second of it. I mean, marriage is a gift, and I'm not married, but I'm guessing that not all married people love every single second of being married.
No way.
Same with motherhood. I've got
love you,
adolescent females in my house right now, and I do not love every single second.
Every second, I love you, man.
Yeah. And I think because we're so, on these sort of parallel tracks of you either have the gift of singleness, which is viewed as sort of this supernatural power to not want to be married, which is a super weird way to view it. I mean, it's like kind of put it in like speaking in tongues sort of category. But I mean, Paul also talks about people having the gift of mercy and the gift of hospitality and the gift of service and teaching and things like that. All things that we can be sort of good at, things that we're maybe not super good at, we need to work on, but are avenues in which we can serve our neighbors, serve our churches, and everything else. So our singleness is a gift to ourselves in that it can focus us on God, because that's what Paul says, is because I'm single, I'm not worried about the things of my household the way the rest of you married folk are. I get to focus on this one thing. So I get to focus on caring and serving my neighbors that way.
For Erin and Ellie both, because I married fairly young, started having kids fairly young. But I have friends, I have family members, cousins, sisters who either married later or haven't married at all. And I look back at some of the things that they've been able to do, both in terms of service and also in terms of adventure. And now when I talk to my own children about singleness as one possibility for their lives and one they may choose or they may have chosen for them, I sort of use these loved ones' experiences to sort of put this option in perspective. For example, I have a cousin who's still single, about my age. Love her very much. She's never been married or had children. She would kind of like to, and, I support her in that. But then she's done a lot of things I haven't done because I was home changing diapers and cooking macaroni. She has been to Fiji. I have not, So what, in your experience, the two of you who are single, what are you thankful for that you've been able to do that you probably wouldn't have been able to do had you not been single?
I don't know that it's necessarily that I wouldn't have been able to do it, but it's certainly it's less complicated because I'm the only one that I have to sort of figure out the logistics for it. So I was able to serve as a volunteer missionary in Japan for 3.5 years. You can certainly do that married as well, but it does just complicate things a little bit more as far as placement goes and things like that. I've been able to travel to many, many places, some on vacation, some for work. And I have married friends at work who also travel, but it is more complicated, especially if they have families and things like that, to try and figure out all of the childcare side of things. I have hobbies. As near as I can tell, a lot of my friends who have families, their hobby is right now their kids, and that's great. I have free time, so
you get to make your own clothes.
I get to sew,
which is so
amazing
cool.
and knit, and
You read books all the
learn
time.
things, reading,
Make your walls sweat. I mean, making giant pots of soup and stuff.
I was wondering why walls were sweating.
It's a whole
story.
It was a pot
saga
of
this
soup
week.
on the
The
stove.
soup saga.
It was really, really humid in my house. Cold outside. It was amazing. So yeah, I do have that sort of freedom. If there's something that I want to be to be able to do, then I only have to look at my own schedule to figure out if I can make that happen and want to devote my time to that, which is great.
I'm a lot more restricted because I'm a single mom as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not just me. Mm-hmm. It's not like I can just say, hey, I'm going to go do this. But the freedom aspect, I mean, choosing to be a deaconess and, considering a call and saying, do I want to accept this call or not, as opposed to, there's more people to factor into the equation and more things that need to happen in order for me to do what I want to do and feel like I'm called to do. This is going to sound terribly selfish.
We're a safe space.
Single people are often accused of being selfish, but I'm really close to my parents, and I'm super glad that I don't have to trade off on in-law Christmases and Thanksgivings and stuff.
That's really
like that.
tough.
I mean, that's really understandable.
My parents we're a military family, and so we have all kinds of super ingrained traditions, and we do the exact same thing every year for Christmas and the exact same thing every year for Thanksgiving.
You taking notes, Rachel?
Yeah, it's kind of part of our family liturgy, if you will. And I would be so bummed out if it was like, well, no, this year we're going to George's family, and I really don't like his mom, but yay, happy Christmas, everyone. I don't have to deal with that.
That's a great me impression, by the way. In-laws.
And I'm sure there would be a lot of great Christian growth to be found in, dealing with in-laws, but the Lord hasn't given me that place to grow. I'm super okay with that.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up the being accused of selfishness, because one of the questions that I have, I'm not sure if you've ever been approached about this or if you've ever thought about this, but within Lutheran culture, I mean, we've heard sayings that people's life choices when they marry, whether they choose to have kids, etc., are potentially affecting growth in the church. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that to a person with that kind of mindset, that it's sort of this duty to go forth and multiply?
Another softball just lobbed to you. There you go.
Wind it up.
How can I answer this without getting into trouble?
Oh, man.
Oh, that's... The thing is Jesus grows the church through his word and sacraments, and he's promised to do that. He's promised to sustain it. So it's not really on me to assume church growth that way. I mean, that's not what I've been given anyway. I don't have a husband. I mean, so what do you want me to do?
I'm under the impression that people sort of see having children as the end game, and marriage is basically, you got to get married before you have kids.
Well,
it's a means to an end.
I think you're completely right. There is that pressure, and I sort of assumes, first of all, that all your children are going to remain in the church. Mm-hmm. We've seen the statistics on that, and a lot of us are scared to death, who are parents, are like, how do I keep my children in the church? Mm-hmm. And so that's a constant thing that we're fighting, is what does the latest studies show so that I can make sure that my kids stay baptized? Because goodness knows, if they go to a public school, they might get unbaptized. I'm sorry.
That's not how it works, but okay.
The homeschooler down here is just hiding behind her.
It's okay. I still love you, Rachel. But it's interesting because I often wonder if that is a decision that's made at the exclusion of talking to your physical neighbors, like going next door and talking to them and developing a relationship with them and saying, hey, would you like to come to church with me sometime? That's a whole lot harder in a lot of ways to live that way and to meet people who aren't like you. I mean, we all like to be in our little enclaves of people who are just like us. And if anything, the church should be the one place we're at every week that is full of people who are nothing like us. I mean, this is Revelation, right? Tribes and nations and everything else. There ought to be a lot of diversity in our churches. And this is another rant for probably another day. But I wonder if it's a way to just be safe and have everybody kind of like us, because they're all our families, and they're other families that are like us.
Right.
And we're all together in kind of our collective group, as opposed to saying, hey, I don't know that person at all, and, I want to get to know them better. They live across the street from me, and I've lived here for 6 years, and I don't even know their name. That's a lot harder. I speak for myself. I mean, I'm challenging myself here a little bit, too.
Well, and I hope that we're not going to put a dichotomy between having children and evangelism, because I'll tell you, my children are much better evangelists than I am.
That's
small people are fearless when it comes. I watched the child of a friend of mine yesterday invite a shop clerk to church on Sunday. It's so but I see I agree with you totally that putting the burden on women especially to get married and have children so that the church doesn't die is I think that's probably unhelpful, but I think it's a misunderstanding of some of the data that have come down to us and one measure of our panic. But I also would love to thank each one of you as a mother for your efforts toward my young people's retention rate in the church, because I think that single people especially, and also childless people, have a role to play in nurturing children in the church, even if you don't have your own.
Amen.
I think of my children, my small daughter Emma's relationship with Bree, she's your biggest fan, Bree, and you know this. But you've been such an encouragement to her.
Yeah.
And I see that in each of you ladies have taken time and opportunity to encourage the young people in your churches, and that's so valuable.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, I think you hit on it too, Rachel. As Christians, all people do strange things when they're panicking, and and Christians aren't exempt from this. And I think because of the demographic challenge that we're all in, I mean, the fact is, we're kind of coming off the baby boom, which is sort of an anomaly anyway. That's why it's called the baby boom of people having larger families, and then culture has changed. We're feeling that fear feeds into that, and it's like, well, this is a really easy, obvious way to tackle it. And I think it's born out of good intentions, and I think that people who have large families are amazing. And I don't even mean, seriously, no condescension or patronizing. I couldn't homeschool. I know I couldn't.
I barely can.
I'd have kids duct taped to the wall if I tried to homeschool. It would not be good. And I am in awe of. I know so many women who do it well and do an amazing job. And I know that those aren't my gifts, and so maybe that's why the Lord hasn't asked me to do that.
It seems apparent. I went to a Concordia.
Me too.
Sarah went to a Concordia.
There is culture.
And I think that there is a pressure in that environment to sort of matriculate with your what is called the MRS degree.
I definitely went. I legit did that. I went to a Concordia with intention of finding a husband.
So it was almost like a challenge for some people to say, I'm going to graduate without my MRS. I'm going to graduate without a ring. Like it was at the point of like there was a counterculture against it. There was like a movement against it.
Are you sharing a hymnal in chapel yet?
Right. I saw you walking in front of the pillars. Yeah. Actually, my husband proposed to me in front of the pillars at Concordia University
That's
in Chicago.
Adorable. My husband proposed to me in the dorm, so.
Oh, that's romantic.
Actually, he didn't propose. We just decided to get married.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, cool.
We should probably just do this.
So
that's how it went down. Anyway. I love you, Luther.
Knowing that there are people in life. I mean, this is sort of new to me, this whole like singleness as a gift thing. People embracing their singleness, that they're not miserable because they're not married, they're not tied down yet. What can I do as someone who is married who cannot necessarily grasp this whole singleness as a gift thing yet? How can people like me support you? What are ways that people who are not single can support you? What are things that you maybe are lacking or would like to see or would like to feel supported in a certain way from somebody who's not single or who maybe doesn't understand singleness as a gift? Like, how can we better support people with this mindset?
You know, I was thinking the other day that singles ministries in churches are almost exclusively about matchups and meetups. Like, that's the reason they exist. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if singles ministry was actually to support single people in being single?
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Not that you've taken this lifelong vow of celibacy, but hey, maybe you could use some support and maybe some encouragement and talking that through. Because it's not as if I woke up and said, you know what, I never want to get married. It wasn't a choice that I consciously made. Probably, I mean, I was probably in my late 20s, and that largely had to do with raising my son. And so it's not as if I went through life just planning to be single.
Right.
I mean, and reaching contentment with that has been a process. It's not as if I just got zapped with these supernatural powers to just be okay with it. But Paul tells us to be content in all things.
Right.
So I think all of us as Christians are kind of working on our contentment together in our lives. And I wonder if we're not super well served in kind of having the singles category and the married category. Because really, a married couple that is a Christian couple that is, living their lives in prayer and faith has much more in common with a single person who's also living their life in prayer and faith and sanctifying all things by the word of God than somebody who is also single but is full on hedonism, baby,
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the separation thing.
Sure.
And I realized I completely skipped over your question about
No,
how to
it's
support
because
you.
as you're speaking about it, because as I was trying to form this question is,
Yeah.
do we treat you like special? Or I mean, you probably still have people coming up to you and being like, "Hey, there's this dude I met the other day. I bet you guys should matchmaker make me a match," kind of stuff like that. I'm sure that drives you up the wall.
Yeah, less of it now. It used to be a lot. In fact, when I took the job here, there were several people that were like, "Oh, there's lots of great single Lutheran men in St. Louis."
Man.
That was the reason I was moving here.
Right.
It was that was my goal in life.
The fields are white for harvest, Ellie.
I think the things the things that I think single people can kind of struggle with a lot is loneliness is an obvious thing. And often things in churches are geared towards families. I mean, even family retreats and the language of family all the time. And when it's just you, it's like, okay, where do I fit in with all of this?
Yeah,
And
that's what I was actually going to add, is that's something that I think I tend to struggle with more, and I've gotten better at it. Like you said, I've sort of learned and grown in that. But that wasn't, that wasn't my childhood, my dream. My childhood, I always figured I was going to grow up and get married and have a family. That was what I
what you do.
figured. Yeah, exactly. And so also that process of growing in contentment. But I've had people through the years who have commented, and it's true to an extent, but they're like, "Oh, it's so nice that you don't have to, when you go home at night, you can just relax." And it is true. I can do that. But I'm like, the people who are telling me this are usually the ones who have family, and they have spouse and kids at home. And I'm like, I have to work harder to be able to have that personal relationship, because I'm at work. I mean, you get a little bit of that at work. I mean, here we're at work and we're having some good personal conversations here right now. But I have to really try and seek that out. And families do tend to spend time together, which is great.
Yeah.
But I treasure those opportunities when I am able to just hang out and spend time with people where it's not always me asking for it.
Yeah.
And asking to be included, sort of thing. It's an odd dynamic that people just, it's natural for families to sort of form family friendships because there's often a lot of matching up. They're like, oh, the wife and the wife, the husband and the husband, the kids and the kids. And I don't fit into, I don't match with that group. But I still like it when I get to be part of it. Yeah.
Well, and there's sort of a line too where it's, and this is just me being fussy, is it's like sometimes people feel like you must be lonely all the time. And so you always need to be with people and invited to things like constantly.
Right.
And people are like, what do you mean? You just went home and walked your dogs and read a book and, that must be terribly lonely. And it's like, not all the time. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, it is. It's nice to be invited to things. It's nice to be included in things, and nice to be included in things because people want you there, not because they feel sorry for you.
not a
because you're
pity
single.
party.
Yeah, it's not a pity
You're
invitation.
satisfying some demographic or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
That's terrible.
Token single.
Love it.
Love it.
And as the full-on single with no trailing children, like I'm usually pretty able to last minute say yes to things.
Yes.
If I don't have plans, I'm like, yeah, I'll do that.
Sure, why not?
And I get that that's harder for families. I know they often have it. It gets more complicated,
Yeah.
but I can do the last minute stuff.
Yeah, and then are you going to do a kid-friendly thing? Or are you going to work out childcare and everything else? But whereas you're like, let's go do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
One last question, if I can. Being now a military wife, which I wasn't for a lot of my marriage, I'm facing lots of times of temporary singleness, including right at this moment.
Yes.
So I'm keen to hear from you single ladies. How do I make the most of this? Because a lot of people may be married at some point and find themselves, in a deployment situation, or find themselves suddenly unmarried. I think about all the widows in our churches and people who have been through divorce, that this wasn't what they planned, but oh, look, here we are. What advice do you have, you two who are actually make being single look really classy and fun? And how can I make the most of this season in my life where it's just me for a while?
Oh, what a big question.
Yeah.
All of the insider info.
Well, I think in terms of, I'll be the deaconess and talk about self-care, is I think you need to know yourself and know kind of, what we were talking, Erin and I were talking about a minute ago is, it's like I need to get out of the house and I need to take the kids and I need to be with other families right now. And I would assume you have the benefit of other spouses that are in a similar boat.
Thankfully, yeah.
Yes. And spend time with them in that support. But also, it's like super okay to have those moments of, you know what? Daddy hates it when we have this for dinner. We all love it. So it's what we're going to do. I know, like I said, when my parents were in the military and when my dad was deployed, for my mom and I, a big thing was breakfast for dinner. Because my dad just thinks breakfast for dinner is just the worst thing.
Wow.
It's not a thing. That's not dinner. And so it was like, Mom and I always had like cool dinners, and we would sort of break the rules in fun ways with each other, whether it was getting a frozen pizza. And it sounds silly, but I mean, we were always, those were the little things that made it fun because it was a little bit of just the special thing that happened when it was just the two of us. And, I think it's okay to find those things that are just the special thing that you enjoy in these times, and you and your children as well. I mean, what's the thing that is your special time? I don't know what that would be for your family, but you're kind of smiling knowingly. So.
So, I have some ideas. So focus, I guess, in all things, focus not on what you can't do, but focus on what you can do, what you're free to do that you wouldn't otherwise be quite as free to do.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole like growing in contentment and not looking at what you wish, but instead looking at what
is. And there's gift in all those things.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You. In everything, there's things that aren't perfect, that aren't right. There's things that you would change, but you can't go through life saying, "Hey, this part's broken and this part's not exactly how I wish it was. There's good in those things that aren't maybe exactly perfect, but the Lord is blessing us even through that, and looking for those places where this is a little blessing that I wasn't expecting to have, and finding that contentment in it. Yeah, the freedom.
Yeah.
That's the wrong thing to say.
Well, I think so much
I do
of
miss
this.
him.
Yes,
can eat
of course
spaghetti.
you do. But, having things that you enjoy while it doesn't mean that you don't miss him.
Yeah.
I mean, those things aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
It can be both at the same time.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like I can be content being single and still be like, oh, it's not the life I would have picked for myself. It is. And
Yeah.
I have a lot of gratitude for what I have.
Yeah. So much of this comes back to contentment. I don't know. We should count how many times we have said that word in the last 40 minutes. But also vocation, where we are, where God has placed us. Where God has placed us to serve our neighbors in whatever situations we're in. So,
Yeah.
Well, Ellie, it has been a joy. It's been super fun having you in
is.
studio with us. We love
Thank
having
you.
people. So thanks for
Thank you.
joining us, taking a lot of your time
very
out of your
welcome.
day to talk with us about singleness. We'll have to have you back because there's like a million other questions that we could ask you.
See, I keep digging myself a hole here.
I mean, it's fine. we
going,
do
girl.
that regularly.
Send all the hate mail to sarah.gulsa@kfuo.
It's true. Well, ladies in Lutheran
Thank
Ladies
you very
Lounge
much.
podcast land. Yes, thank you, Ellie. Thanks for listening to this episode. Maybe you have some of your own thoughts, your own insights. We'd love to hear them in our Facebook group. If you're not in it already, go find us on Facebook in the Lutheran Ladies Lounge. You can always find our episodes at kfuo.org/Lutheran Ladies Lounge. Or if you have a favorite podcast player, of course, you can just search for us. We're there. You're listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Bree.
And I'm Rachel.
Views and opinions expressed on the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast may not represent the official position of the management or ownership of KFUO Radio, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The Lutheran Ladies Lounge is produced by KFUO Radio and available at kfuo.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Join our community on Facebook in the Lutheran Ladies Lounge.